So far this year, we watched movies based on the Beanie Baby bubble, the creation of the Flaming Hot Cheetos, the invention of the BlackBerry phone, the negotiation over Tetris, and all the meetings it took Nike to make Air Jordan a thing. Some of these were fun, but if you're looking for a making of that is compelling without needing to resort to a fictionalized car chase, then let me introduce you to the Making of Karateka, a game that not only introduces one of the most influential games of all time to a brand new audience, but also sets a new high water mark for all classic game re-releases. Get ready to kick that bird square in its face, because this is my review of the Making of Karateka by Digital Eclipse. The one thing you need to know about the Making of Karateka is that despite what the title suggests, this is not the story of Karateka. In reality, this is the origin tale of Jordan Mechner, a teenage artist who stumbled his way into designing video games and eventually goes on to make one of the most enduring franchises of all time. It's a story about struggle, ambition, and what you do when the industry rejects you. And this well-crafted package allows us to be there every single step of the way. Jordan Mechner is probably best known for his 1989 action game Prince of Persia, but before that was Karateka. This was a side-scrolling brawler where a kung fu master ascends a mountain in order to fight through Akuma's evil fortress in order to rescue the Princess Mariko. On paper, that sounds like every other ninja game released in the 1980s. But what sets Karateka apart is the silky smooth rotoscoped animation and the incredibly intense one-on-one fights with the fortress guards. This was a game that managed to overcome the limitations of the hardware to create a cinematic experience that was really unlike anything else on the market. Using a similar interface to Atari 50, the anniversary celebration, Digital Eclipse takes us back to the very beginning when Jordan was little more than a caricature artist saving up for a new computer. Through interviews, images, and documentary footage, we see Jordan learn how to code and eventually create a shoot-'em-up of his own named Asteroid Blaster, an action game with more than a passing resemblance to Atari's 1979 game Asteroids. What's cool about this package is how we go from just reading about these early games to finally having an opportunity to actually play them. For me, seeing the various prototypes and variations is one of my favorite parts of the Making of Karateka. There's a point early on where Jordan, who is bitter after getting screwed by his previous publisher, ends up pitching his newest game to Broderbund. This game was called Death Bounce, and it combined the gameplay of Asteroids with a bunch of colored balls bouncing around the screen. What's so captivating about all this is how we're able to read the letters between the developer and the publisher, showing us the push and pull of the creative process. You'll read through Broderbund's list of notes and then be able to play Jordan's next revision, giving you a window into how a creative person can expand and improve on their idea with critique. These are not subtle changes either, as the 4 different versions introduce major structural shifts, the introduction of new enemies, better gameplay, and more. You see, I bring all this up because this making of experience shines a light on aspects of the gaming world that we rarely think about. Here we see a game literally taking shape through back and forth correspondence, only to have it end with crushing disappointment. As somebody who's freelanced for a lot of different companies over the years, I found myself relating to Jordan's frustrations. The feeling that what's on the screen is good enough, yet not good enough all at the same time. The need to hit a moving target that might not even be there when you've addressed all their concerns. When was the last time you saw any of this in a video game? By the time we make it to Karateka, we're already invested in Jordan's story and we want him to succeed. We root him on as he begins to toy around with the rotoscope animation process, and cheer when we see his father literally climb onto the hood of a car just so Jordan can animate our hero ascending the mountain. The game takes us through every step of the process, from the inspiration of the background image to the importance of the music to create drama. This is even more impressive as Jordan himself explains the limitations of the Apple II hardware, humbly reminding you that there were not blueprints for making cinematic games back in the day. What he was doing had never been done before. That's why it was so exciting seeing Karateka slowly come together. First, it's through Jordan's prototype version, which is much shorter and a simpler version of the game. From there, we get one revision after another. By the time we get to the finished product, we can finally exhale because we know how much work it took to get there. Jordan Mechner finally made a game that people could go and buy on the store shelves. At long last, we could finally play the masterpiece that is Karateka. Of course, that's not where the story ends. This making of experience later goes into the marketing of the game, as well as porting it to the Commodore 64 and Atari computers, both of which are playable in this package. There's a treasure trove of marketing materials and magazine articles and write-ups, including one 1985 review where the critic praises the game for having a pause button. We're also treated to look at the notes and ideas swirling around the proposed Karateka 2, a game that never came out. From the early days of just wanting to draw comics to the aftermath of his first big game, the making of Karateka chronicles the rise of one of gaming's true pioneers. And you know, many of my favorite moments in this documentary experience involve a very friendly and personable Jordan being interviewed with his father, Francis Mechner. These two have great rapport, and it's just so much fun watching them reminisce about big and small moments along the way. I was honestly a little bit surprised by how much Francis helped in the development, especially when it came to creating the iconic music. I loved the conversations and tangents these two went on, and I didn't want it to end. Now, that's not to say that the rest of the interviews are dull, because they bring a new layer of context that's important to the story of Karateka. We hear things through the perspective of Broderbund, as well as the people who worked hard to port the game to other computers. We also check in with the developers who were actually inspired by Jordan and his seminal game, including, among others, John Tobias, who would later be influenced to make his own fighting game, Mortal Kombat. Once again, Digital Eclipse is able to show the importance of Karateka from so many different sides. Now, for those who just want to get to the games, this package comes with 14 to choose from. We get both the unreleased Asteroid Blaster and Death Bounce, along with a bunch of different variations of both. There are also a handful of versions of Karateka to play, including the early prototype versions and the ports of the Apple, Atari, and Commodore computers. And if that wasn't enough, we also get newly enhanced versions of both Death Bounce and Karateka, the latter of which includes an audio commentary that sheds even more light on the importance of the game. From a historical perspective, this package gives Karateka fans pretty much everything they could possibly want. Look, this is how all classic games should be re-released. I want to see the history unfold and listen to developers put the game in proper context. Even if it's something silly like Bubsy the Bobcat. I get a headache every single time I start thinking about how many influential games deserve to get the Gold Master Series treatment. And I can't wait to see what Digital Eclipse gives us next. This is not only a high watermark for video game re-releases, but it's honestly the closest the video game industry has ever gotten to the Criterion Collection. No matter if you grew up loving the classic beat-em-up or are only now hearing about it for the very first time, because the making of Karateka is for you. This is an immensely enjoyable trip through Jordan Mechner's early days, giving us an insight on the creative process and the highs and lows of game development. This must-own package comes with more than a dozen games, including prototypes, ports, variations, and a number of Jordan's early shoot-em-ups that were previously unreleased. It's also filled with interviews, documentary footage, and all kinds of images, taking you on a surprisingly emotional and heartwarming story about the early days of game development. Honestly, I would call the making of Karateka one of the best games of the year, but it's so much more than that. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What should be the next game in the Gold Master series? Oh boy, I mentioned John Tobias earlier, and I'd love to see him tackle Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. Just think about all the different revisions and the archival footage and the fatalities they didn't do. There's gotta be a lot of fun stories there. Oh no, the headache's coming back. I need to stop. I could be here all day coming up with ideas. I can't wait to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back on Friday with a new episode of Nintendo Switch Online Review Crew. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,